Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
Let me go ahead and call the December 8th special call meeting to order. And I'm going to ask Ms. Only for the roll call for members present.
Malinowski,
Here.
Dickerson,
Here.
McBride,
Here.
Livingston,
Here.
Teratio,
Here.
Walker,
Here.
Kennedy, Manning,
Here.
Myers, Newton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Next item is the invocation. I'll ask, and the following invocation is pledge allegiance. I'll ask the Honorable Allison Teratio for the invocation to lead us in pledge allegiance. Teratio, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just ask you to, wherever you are, settle in. Right now, I'm in the living room by the Christmas tree. And it's always a reminder that we are entering into the darkest days of the year, where those days where we feel like maybe the light may never come back. And we may feel that there is darkness and isolation and loneliness. And it's at these very moments that we bring light into our homes to remind ourselves that there will be a moment of turning back around and making a fresh start. That the days will get longer, that we will get to reemerge and see each other again, and that we'll be able to connect and feel the warmth of the sun again. And so with that, I'll say, may we have the patience and strength to hold on through this dark and difficult time, and the inner light to imagine ourselves as what will be in the coming year. And to bring that fortitude to our meeting tonight, to have the strength and vision to imagine how we might serve and lead the county. And with that, again, just notice where you are, wherever you're sitting, whatever light surrounds you. Thank you. And now the Pledge of Allegiance. So if, from wherever you're sitting or standing, if you like, you can place your hand over your heart and we'll pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That was so nice to hear your voices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teratio.
Yes.
Next item on our agenda is item 4, approval of minutes. 4A is our regular session minutes for November 17th. The chair entertains a motion for item 4A, the regular session agenda for November 17th.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's moved and properly second. Is there any discussions about changes, deletions? If not, Ms. Owen, can you call the roll for approval of the minutes as presented?
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Newton, you recognize.
I apologize. Are we approving 4A and 4B, Mr. Chair?
No, just 4A.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
McBride, yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning, Myers, Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 4B, zoning public hearing, November 19th minutes. Chair, entertain a motion.
So
So
moved,
moved.
Mr. Chair.
It's moved.
I'll second it.
Second, properly second. Any changes, deletions, anything reference the minutes for the zoning public hearing for November 19th? If not, I'll ask Ms. Owens to call the roll for the motion.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning, Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to the adoption of the agenda. Let me first ask staff, is there anything, any changes in the agenda, reference staff?
Mr. Chair, I have not received any requests for changes to the agenda from any members of staff. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Livingston,
My colleagues, any,
Yeah. Mr. Chair, Bill Malinowski.
man, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add one item. The Rules and Appointment Committee has one item related to an advertisement, and that would be all. We currently don't have a report, but we met today and felt we needed to report this out.
So you don't have a place on the agenda now, do you?
No, sir.
And that's coming out of the committee from today?
Yes.
And Ms. Malinas, give me, I'll make that item after the last report, which is the sewer ad hoc committee report.
Okay.
And what is that item again?
Rules and Appointments.
No, I know it came out of rules and appointments, but what the specific item though?
Advertising a vacancy on a board.
Okay. And we'll put that right after report of the sewer ad hoc committee.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one change on one addition to 11B under the chair's report. It's stated under there as personnel matter, county attorney, and that slash should have been personnel contractual. So it's the word contraction needs to be included there too. Anything else to reference the adoption of the agenda? If not, then the motion would be the adoption of the agenda is amended. I'll ask Ms. Owens to call the roll for the motion.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning,
No.
Myers, Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 6, report of the attorney for executive session items. Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chair, item 11B under the chair's report would qualify for executive session. And we have no outside counsel, so that matter can be done at the end of the agenda.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, that completes your report?
Yes, sir.
That brings us to item 7, citizen input. Item 7A, an item on the agenda not requiring a public hearing. Ms. Only, did anyone try to speak to that public hearing?
No, sir.
The next item is 8A. The public hearing must pertain to a Richland County matter and not on the agenda. Items for which a public hearing is required or a public hearing has been scheduled. Ms. Only, anyone sign up for that public hearing?
No, sir.
If not, that public hearing is not closed and closed. That brings us to item 9 on your agenda, report of the county administrator, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of council. In your packet, you have a report that's titled Coronavirus Update. I will be brief with these numbers because we have a meeting next week, and I'll spend a little bit more time going into some of the details related to Richland County's coronavirus numbers. So if you look at it on your agenda packet on page 27, I'll focus on the mask giveaway event. We have one that is scheduled for District 11 that's going to happen on Friday. That is December the 11th. It will occur at the Richland County Sheriff Region 1 substation, and it'll be held from 10 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. So again, mass giveaway event, District 11, Richland County Sheriff State Substation, Region 1, December the 11th from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Next week, I will also give you an update on the number of masks that we have passed out as a function of all the council districts being a part of the mask giveaway event. Also on that same document, you will notice that I listed on there again the preparation that we are looking at taking on in consideration of offering some limited in-person services. Again, I'll kind of speak more in detail about that on next week when I talk about the numbers that we're seeing in Richland County and our surrounding counties. I do want to take a moment to point your attention to the additional updates for consideration. We do have a continued partnership with Prisma Health. They are still currently using the Sears facility. And right now our contract with them to use that facility is going through December. We have not received a request for January, but I will let you know if we receive an additional request for continued COVID testing to be presented by Prisma at that facility. Also, I listed under there for your consideration, want to take just a few moments to talk about our emergency services personnel and the physical, mental, and emotional toll of COVID-19 on that particular department. Certainly, I recognize that many county employees are affected by COVID-19, but I specifically just want to point out to council that the increase in COVID-19 requirements that are placed on emergency services personnel has a specific level of strain and stress that maybe some other departments don't have. And I want to just make sure that as we continue to see these rising numbers, that we think about the men and women who have to go out and facilitate those persons potentially getting medical emergency services. Those men and women a lot of times work for Richland County, and they themselves are being exposed. And we have had an increased number of exposures to that based on the rise in numbers. So again, I just want to make sure that when we think about emergency services that are being presented, that these are human beings that are out there being affected by this work. And please keep in consideration the men and women in the emergency services department when we think about what we can do to decrease the spread of COVID-19 from a Richland County standpoint. Wanted to also point out just briefly in the packet, I did provide for you one of the attachments. And again, that's to give you a good idea of what it takes when you're affected by COVID-19. So the CDC has listed some guidance about who should quarantine and when they should quarantine. And that document is in your packet. And what I simply want to point out with that document is that if you look at the options to reduce the quarantine time frame, you will notice that even in reducing that time frame, you're still talking about someone being away from the workplace for 10 or 7 days, depending on what steps they have taken. So when we have exposures at the county to our personnel, to individual employees, whether they're at home coming to work, we take people out of rotation potentially for at a minimal of 7 days, depending on what steps they've taken, whether or not they were a close contact and they didn't have any symptoms and they've gotten tested. So I just want to kind of point this out to you as we talk about offering additional in-person services, that we just want to make sure we understand that we are seeing an increase in exposures. And so when you have an exposure, I wanted you to see how people are impacted in being taken out of the workplace and how that could impact your operations. If you're talking about losing staff persons for 7 to 10 to 14 days, and that's potentially even if they themselves don't have COVID, but they just may be in close contact with someone who had COVID-19. So, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to bring that information to the body. I will certainly entertain any questions at this time related to the report that I just gave.
Any questions of Mr. Brown? If not, Ms. Brown, that completes your report.
It does, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the report of the interim clerk of council. Ms. Olin.
Clerk's office, yeah, the clerk's office doesn't have a report.
Thank you. That brings us to the report of the chair. Under item 11A, we'll have council retreat. We've made one decision about the retreat, and that was that it will be local at the township auditorium. But a couple other questions that came about, I want to make sure I get some feedback from council members. One of them was regarding trading options, whether or not we want to do box lunch or how we want to do that. It's something I just want to get some feedback on so we can move forward with planning, as well as the question comes up each time about whether or not we want to live stream or record, how we want to do that. So I want to get some feedback on that item too. So let me start with item 1. Any specific questions or requirements, anything you want to address as it relates to creating options, since our next meeting will be our last meeting prior to the retreat. Well, not the retreat, but regular meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Walker, you recognize.
what are the anticipated hours?
I'm sorry, Mr.
During
Walker, couldn't hear you. A little louder.
What are the anticipated hours that will be working, quote unquote, during the retreat?
Good question, because normally times are vary, but one of those days is an all-day thing. So let me back up and ask Mr. Brown how far he's gotten with that thought, based on the conversation we've had.
Yes, certainly unmute myself. So, Mr. Walker, members of council, the expectation, if I'm not mistaken, if I can remember the agenda, you're talking about a 9 a.m., I believe, start time, and I do have Ms. Myers, who's on the call, who can help me out. I believe it's a 9 a.m. start time on day 1, and an end time, I believe it's after 3 in the afternoon, and potentially the same for day 2. We're still working out the details of that, but so roughly about 9 or 3 for both of those days, Mr. Walker.
Thank you. That being the case, given that the hours of anticipated operation for us during the retreat are inside that of a standard working day for all of our employees, I would suggest we simply break for lunch and eat on our own expense. Thank you.
Okay. Any other observations reference lunch or catering, or anything in between lunches, anything that particular nature, whatever? Feedback.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Baker, you recognize.
Yeah, normally I think, we kind of do a little bit of a working lunch, we all get a plate and kind of sit together. But given this, I'm not even sure that it would be necessarily safe to, even if we had a box lunch, to kind of eat in the same place. So I would support kind of giving us a break to go off site for a period of time so that we could get some food and then come back.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I support that also, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Are there any objections to that?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, let me make it easy for you. I'd like to make a motion that we take a 1-hour lunch break during our retreat, both working days, and extend the end time as needed to facilitate the full instructional time anticipated by our administrator.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
You want to be recognized? Anyone want to speak to the motion? If not, let me ask it's only to carry the motion, vote for the motion.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson, McBride,
Yes, yes, I guess I support.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning,
Abstain.
Myers,
Myers abstains.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank
Miss
you.
Only, may I retract mine and abstain since I won't be there? I will abstain for the reason that I will not be attending the meeting. So can you put me down for an abstention?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, I wanted to make sure we were clear on the discussion we have each year about how we want to make sure in terms of transparency and how we want to make sure whether it's live stream recording, how we want to do the meeting. Just want to get some feedback on that so we're very clear too. So the floor is now open for any comments regarding options in terms of how we want to do the meeting itself.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. McBride, you recognize.
in the past, what have we done? Just the recording?
I think we've done both. I'm gonna ask Ms. Only to speak to that if she would remember.
In the past, we have recorded it and then PIO staff edited it and put it up on the county website for viewing.
Okay, and do you have the participation? Can you recall? Citizens' participation?
I do not. I can get with Ms. Harrison and find that out.
I think it was very small. Is that not so?
Yes, ma'am, I believe it was.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Ms. Dixon, you recognize that.
Miss McBride, you're absolutely right. The participation was extremely low. I don't remember the numbers, but I remember that it was extremely low. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Teresa, you recognize.
Thank you. You know, I'm not as technologically savvy, but you know, we've been doing Zoom meetings since March, and I think just they automatically get live streamed on YouTube at this point. Is there not a way to kind of use the technology that we have to do something very similar to what we are doing from the comfort of our homes right now?
I'll have to check back to you and other folks. You know, there may be something. But now we voted, we have to change. We voted to do it at the Township Auditorium as far as a retreat. We'd have to change that if we're talking about not going anywhere.
Well, no, I mean, using kind of the same technology, having some kind of internet
not
capable device.
Technology.
Yes, using the same technology that we use right now, but that we would just happen to all be in the same room, kind of like, you know, when some of the staff are in, say, the big conference room. We just had a sewer ad hoc committee where we had staff sitting in the big conference room using our technology there and participating in the meeting. And that meeting was essentially live streamed on YouTube.
That's a great idea. Between now and next meeting, we'll make sure we get that kind of feedback from IT and see what we can relate to that. Ms. McBride, and then now announce.
Could we get how much it's going to cost for that? With the feedback, could you provide us a cost?
Okay, Ms. McBride,
could you hear me?
Yes, you see at the floor.
That's it. I just wanted, I think that's a great idea, but I would like to look at the cost for it.
Yeah, we'll include that with the feedback they bring us back about how to be done. Ms. Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at how we've done it, I guess the 1 or 2 retreats that I've been there, what I would recommend is that we just give staff the directive that we would like to live stream the meeting if technologically possible and reasonable in cost, and that if that's not possible, that we then record the meeting and just move forward that way. So whether the solution is Zoom or some other solution, if it's technologically feasible and not overwhelmingly expensive, we live stream. And if it is too complicated and we just need to record it, that we just do that and direct staff to move on.
Okay. Ms. McBride, your hand's up again. Are you?
Oh, no, sir. I just didn't lower it.
So someone want to make a motion, how we want to move forward? Ms. Newcomb, is that a motion?
Sure, I move that we direct staff to find the best technological solution to provide transparency for our meeting. And if it allows for live streaming, that we do that. And if recording the meeting is better from a technological or cost perspective, that we do that.
That's a motion. That's second.
I second it.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion after that motion? Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in agreement with Ms. McBride when she initially said we really should have a cost. And I don't think it's fair to put this burden on staff to tell them, let us know if you can do it. The odds are they can do it. And then tell them, and if you think it's feasible in a reasonable amount, go ahead and do it. I think that staff needs to come back to council with those answers. And at that point, it should be incumbent upon council to make that decision. I would make a substitute motion that we have staff come back with information to the questions that were asked at the next meeting, and we vote on it at that point in time. It will still leave plenty of time for staff to do whatever they need to do. That's my substitute motion.
I second it.
It's moved and properly second. Any discussion on substitute motion? One thing we could do with the substitute motion is it may afford us a time to, if we want to get some feedback reference this from the current newly elected members. Any other question about the anything else regarding the substitute motion? We're doing the same thing. We're just bringing it back to council. Consider. If not, Ms. Only, can you call the roll for the substitute motion?
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Abstain.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning, Myers,
Myers abstains.
Newton.
Sure.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And item 11B, that will be an executive session item later. So that moves us to item 12 on our agenda. Open.
Mr. Chair, before we move,
Yes, go ahead, please.
when will we discuss the agenda or get any information about what's going to be presented at the retreat?
That should be on the next agenda too, and it'll get to you in the mail before then. I think it's pretty much, Mr. Brown, that's pretty much complete in terms of what you're doing. So we could probably, Mr. Brown, at least have a look at that at our next meeting, correct?
So will we have we won't have any input?
Well, yes. I'll ask Mr. Brown to send out what he has right now for the opportunity to have some input.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. We sent some information to the chair related to input for the agenda so we can get prepared, so that we could prepare the agenda and prepare the documentation and get staff to do that. So we do have some agenda items that we have already prepared. Certainly we can provide that to you. At this point, if there were some drastic changes, there may be a potential challenge, but we'll certainly send you what we have and see what your thoughts are consistent with your request on tonight.
And one more question, Mr. Chair.
You recognize?
Do we have a facilitator for the retreat?
Not for the whole retreat, but for part of the retreat, yes, ma'am, we do. That is part of our plans for our conversation with the council.
And has this facilitator been involved at all with the development of the agenda?
In relationship to their particular part,
Mhm.
but no, ma'am, we don't have a facilitator for the entirety of the presentation that we'll be providing to council. We have a facilitator that we have a job to do in a part of the agenda training that we have prepared for council.
Okay, so it's just a general facilitator. And not someone dealing with strategies and priorities. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Any further questions? That brings us to item 12, open and close public hearings. Item 12A, authorize the execution delivery of fee in lieu of ad valorem taxes, infrastructure credit agreement by between Richland County, South Carolina, and Project Yeti to provide for payment of fee in lieu of taxes, authorizing certain infrastructure credits and other matters thereof. That public hearing is now open. Did anyone sign up to speak at that public hearing, Ms. Holmes?
No, sir.
The public hearing is now closed. That brings us to item 12B, authorize execution delivery of fee in lieu of ad valorem tax agreement by between Richland County, South Carolina, and Project Offer to provide for payment fee in lieu of taxes and other related matters. That public hearing is now open. Did anyone sign up to speak at that public hearing? Ms. Holmes?
No, sir.
The public hearing is now closed. That brings us to item 13, approval of consent items. Item 13A, 20-032 MA, Ryan Malta, RU to GC, and that's 4551 Hardscrabble Road, tax map number
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of all the consent items.
There's a motion for approval for all
Chair, I
consent items.
I second the motion, Mr. Mann. I
Item-
second that motion.
And proper second, that's item 13B through N.
Mr. Chair,
Properly second. And discussion, reference to consent items.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Teresa, you're recognized.
Thank you. I would like to make a substitute motion.
Go ahead, please.
So I would move for approval of items A, B, C, and L, M, N, and take the others one by one.
And say that again, make sure I have them all. A, B,
C and L, M, N. And additionally, I would move to either combine or consolidate D
Can
and
we-
J.
okay.
Okay. Do you want to do this one by one? Sorry.
Yeah, might help us here.
Okay.
Well, I'll second that motion.
It's moved properly second.
What's the motion, Mr.
And
Chair?
the second was to approve the following consent items. It was
ABC, LMN?
A, B, C, L, M, N. Is that correct?
Yes. So the first three and the last three.
That's the substitute motion, properly second. Then discussion on the substitute motion. If not, we'll carry the, we'll vote on the substitute motion. Again, that's A, B, and C, and L, M, N for consent items. Ms. Only call roll for substitute motion.
Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Kennedy, Manning,
No.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
items 13L and 13M are time sensitive for emergency services purchasing. Would you please move for, can we ask for reconsideration on those items, please? L and M?
Move for reconsideration.
The motion reconsideration, item L and M.
Mr. Chair,
Second.
Second.
Mr. Chair,
Smack right now.
may I add item C to that, please?
The motion is to add item C.
To the
The
reconsideration?
reconsideration. Make a motion, to accept that.
I'll second, or yes, sorry.
Okay,
Second.
so that would be reconsideration for C as well. Anyone else need to be recognized on the motion reconsideration? If not, Ms. Owen, can you call the roll for motion reconsideration? I think that was item L, M, and C.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson,
No.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
No.
Teresa,
No.
Walker,
No.
Manning.
No.
Was no, could you hear me?
Yes, sir, I got you. Myers,
Yes.
Newton. Newton,
Yes.
motion fails.
Thank you. That brings us to, if I'm correct, item D.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Myers, recognize.
just for clarity as to item C, there was outstanding information. Can I just ask that we get that information before we move on? We were waiting
Well,
to find out where.
yeah, we need to get information, but I can't undo the vote though.
I'm not asking to undo it. I just want.
But I'll
the
make sure,
information.
but I agree with you to make sure we get that information.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
For that Prisma, I believe, are you, Ms. Myers, are you referring to where the well exactly is? I think it,
No.
they included okay,
No.
sorry.
No, I was referring to the ownership. The legal department needed to give us specific information as to the ownership and what there were specific restrictions that I was asking about in the meeting. So yeah, that one was a little bit more sensitive. I know they gave us the where, but they didn't answer the question as to, whether or not granting that, because it is on public property that the county owns, what damage that might do to the lease with Prisma and what rights we had under that. Mr. Malinowski and I both had those questions raised and they didn't get answered.
Mr. Brown, can you proceed to make sure we have answers to those questions?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that question was a question for the legal team, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of ownership and the lease. But I can follow up and work with Brad. He was working with that, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. That brings to item D, other consent items.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Fraser, you recognize.
Thank you. For item D, because it is so similar in what we're doing to item J, and I guess item E is similar, but I guess we're tabling that one. Can we combine or consolidate those two items just to have less to discuss here? Or I would move to combine or consolidate those.
You talked about item, you said item D and J?
Yes. Yes.
I'll second that.
Ms. Myers, let me let you speak to that because I think one of those were something that came from you. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, they're both from me, and I second the motion. I don't mind if they're consolidated, but just remember that one is a park and one is not. But yes, I don't mind that at all.
The question is consolidate them into one, trying to make them one thing, or consolidate them in terms of voting on them together?
Just to consolidate the the issues so that we can have one discussion is the kind of intent there.
Mr. Chair.
That's what I was getting at that point, yes. Go ahead, then, Ms. Manning.
Thank you. So to clarify, the way that I see it is that item J would fall under item D in the same way that item E falls under D. So what I'm thinking you mean by consolidation is that the design build and the plans for that process become part of the comprehensive facilities plan. That is correct? Or is that correct, rather?
No,
yes.
That's not
Or,
correct
sorry.
from my perspective. So no, then I would not, I would withdraw my second. No.
That's why I raised the point. Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the DNS committee took up some of these items. And I know that one of those motions about the third-party consultant was tweaked and reworded at the DNS committee and came out of there, but I'm not seeing where that is anywhere on this agenda.
But that was related to the one regarding consulting, yes. Third party consulting.
Actually, may I ask
It was
Mr. Manning a
the
question?
Renaissance Committee.
Ms. Manning, you through?
Yeah, if there's not an answer to the question about what happened to it, I'm done.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Lee, you recognize. And then Ms. McBride.
looking at this agenda again, to Mr. Manning's question, I thought that actually item E was maybe what came out of DNS, and then the motion that got tabled was in regards to our EMS facility, that was tabled because it was rolled in here. But yeah, so D and E are essentially the same. I'm done, Mr.
Yes.
Mr.
Any,
Mr. Chair.
I had Ms. McBride, I think, next. Then
Mr. Chair, I agree with Mr. Manning, a slight differently though. On D, it was in the Renaissance Committee. And I think you made the motion, unless I've lost this, the motion that we would priority be given to Department of Social Services and EMS, Emergency Management. And I can't see your wording, but I know that Ms. Dickerson and I think Ms. Dickerson amended the motion to include that, and I don't see that.
And also the antique mall.
Yeah, I don't see that any place.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. That's where it was. It wasn't DNS. You're right. That's where it was.
Yeah, because I made note when I was reading that. It's just missing. I don't know where your motion is, Mr.
So
Chair.
point of order. So where did these things come from, since they were all dealt with in the Renaissance Ad Hoc Committee and were redone? So how these come here instead of the work that was done on these items in the Renaissance Committee?
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because some of them were sent to was said it would be taken up in DNS.
But I thought when we just, Ms. Matt, let me let Ms. Manning go. Ms. Manning, you recognize.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Chair. I'll wait till y'all finished figuring this one out.
Yeah. I thought during the discussion the last time is, I assume after the discussion, we didn't need D from our last vote, because we talked about, having a third party, and we talked about those things in that vote that we took. at the previous meeting we're talking about.
Mr. Chair, point of
Nice.
clarification.
Bring that clarification.
Thank you.
Yep,
Since
now,
these are my motions, I just note that you are absolutely correct, but these just look like they've been consolidated, by the staff. It's just all the leftover stuff, and it doesn't reflect what has happened in the committees. So these are just the motions as provided from council members when they were provided. They do not reflect any of the committee meetings, and the motions being discussed, raised by Ms. Teresa, both were discussed in DNS and in Renaissance, and there are new consolidated motions, but I thought that you had approved these, but these are vastly different from where they should be. So perhaps I would suggest that we defer the remaining items on the consent agenda, because many of them are incorrect, to our next week's meeting.
Ms. Myers, I'd really like to support that motion, and I second that motion because this is really confusing to me as well, because I thought a couple of those items, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I be recognized?
Yeah, I just want some clarification from Ms. Myers before that. Though.
Before you do that, Ms. Myers, I'd like to, because this
let me just, Ms. Dixon, let me get some clarification from Ms. Myers, what she was saying about.
That's what I said.
What she was making. Ms. Myers, quickly. Now, were you referring to those items D and E, or all the items on the consent agenda?
Well, D and E, D, E, and I think it's J specifically, but there are several of them that have this issue.
But there's some that's not. That's why I was just asking the question.
Okay, if you give Ms. Dickerson the floor, I will separate them out for you really quickly.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dixon, you may go ahead, and then Ms.
I just wanted to say, I just wanted to say, because I'm looking at these, and the Renaissance Committee, and also A&F Committee, this is not the way it was worded. I believe, if I make no mistake, that one of them was tabled and left in committee, and the other one we said it would be taken up in the DNS committee. So these are really confusing and overlapping. So before we take up these items to give this, approve these consent items, I do think we probably need to defer them and make sure we have them correct and the correct information to back them up by our next meeting.
Chair Livingston, if I may, this is Ashia.
Yeah. That helps out. Please go ahead.
I'm going to attempt to help you all out. In reference to the items from the Renaissance Committee meeting, during the conversation, the only item that actually came out of the Renaissance Committee was the item relative to the development of a proposal for the beautification of the old antique mall and the Broad River Corridor Facade Grant Program. That actually staff was directed during that conversation to combine it into a more comprehensive plan, moved by Mr. Manning, second by Ms. McBride. Following that meeting, during the Development and Services Committee, one of the items for action was the third-party consultant, but that was changed on the motion of Mr. Manning, second by Ms. Newton, to authorize administration to engage a third-party consultant to do a comprehensive review of the long-term facilities plans, service delivery planning, and construction work necessary, and to also rebrand the plan formerly known as the Richland Renaissance. The EMS EOC facility moving to Two Notch Road in Cushman was the tabled motion. Coming out of the Administration and Finance Committee, the motion relative to the private donation that was moved to the legal department, and also the engagement of a third-party building design company for action was also added to that comprehensive motion made by Manning and seconded by Ms. Newton. I hope that provides clarity as to the direction staff was given per the actions of the committees relative to these various items.
Thank you. That motion seemed to accomplish D.
So Mr. Livingston.
Ms. Bynes, you were on hold for come back to, so go ahead.
Yeah. So that would be actually Ms. Myers' comments are in harmony with what many of the council members have said, because that would be D, E, and J that would be subsumed by that. K is a little bit separate, but those will be subsumed by that and they shouldn't appear on this consent agenda this way. So I would again suggest that for D, E, and J, that those be deferred to next week so that we could clean up what actually happened so that all council members understand and can vote appropriately.
Okay, and did I get a
And
second
that's
for
what,
that?
and I second
I
that.
think you
I
second that, and I just want to
Yes,
clarify
I
that.
did.
So the motion is for moving properly second for deferral of item D, E, and J. That is non-debatable. I'm going to call for the ask Mrs. Only call for the vote for motion for deferral for item D, E, and J.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes, ma'am.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
That brings us to item F. Still a property located on Farrell Road. To entertain a motion for item F.
Move to approve.
Mr. Ray, so you're gonna, if you read to B.
Well, I don't want to second that.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair. Move to approve the committee recommendation.
It's been moved and properly second for item F to support committee's recommendation. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. McBride, you recognize.
could you please give me the committee's recommendation? Because we had a lot of discussion on this. There were a number of recommendations, and I'm not sure what was recommended. So that's, I've had a number of questions about this because I'm not sure
I'm
what
asked,
the recommendation was.
Mr. Brown, can you have someone speak to this item, sale of property located in Farrell Road?
Yes, sir. I can. So this actual item was, if I'm not mistaken, there was a question that was raised by, there was a discussion about the different properties and how do properties come to be before the body that were, just because someone solicited the request of the property, that the county has a policy now, and that there was a discussion, I believe, by Mr. Malinowski, if my memory serves me correct, said that the county needs to work with the council to develop an actual list. And then at that point in time, we could begin to determine with council direction what properties could be appropriately considered. I believe that's correct.
And
Mr. Chair?
I have a follow-up.
Okay.
And that's what I thought we discussed, but this says the sale of property located on Farrell Road, which is very misleading because we're not talking about the sale of this property.
Well, yeah, there was, I believe that item is tied to a request that the county received from someone who came to the county and said, I want to purchase this property. And because it was brought to the county, that was brought to the ANF committee to say, we received this request for a purchase. How do you want us to proceed?
Yeah, Mr. McBride, just making a legitimate point that if someone from the public was looking at this, they would think you're selling property, correct, Mr. McBride?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they would think we're trying to sell this property on Farrell Road, which was the request was to sell it for less than, we'll lose $5 million on it. But anyway,
Mr. Chair,
we need to clarify the topic.
Mr. Chair, may I be recognized?
Let me let Mr. Malinowski finish, then you recognize.
Okay.
I think what the public needs to be advised and needs to be put into these the cover pages possibly is, if you look at page of our agenda, well, I've got 227 if it's amended.
I got 227.
Okay, that the ANF committee recommendation is there. which says just what Mr. Brown said, and that is what we are voting on, is my understanding. Thank you.
That's correct.
But you see why it's misleading, Mr. Malinowski.
Oh, I do. If you don't have it, you're absolutely right.
Any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, I was supposed to be recognized.
Thank you very much for reminding me. Go ahead.
I do believe Mr. Malinowski brought to our attention during that meeting was that the way these items get on the agenda was that it didn't come the way a person came to the county, to the administration, and that item was put on there. And Mr. Malinowski had some questions about how this item got on the A&F committee's agenda. And I have, and I believe I voted against it. I don't remember, but because I believe that we should not be getting rid of this property right now. And I do not like the fact that we are losing money on the sale of this property. So I cannot, and I will not support it, even though it came out, I believe, as a consent, but I'm against it. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
But Mr. Chair,
Mr. McBride?
That's Ms. Livingston. We're not voting on this property right here located on Farrow Road. We're voting on the process. Could you restate what we're voting on?
Right. We're voting on the staff recommendation that was referred to by Mr. Malinowski. Like he gave the page number. We're not talking about selling in one property. We're talking about that motion. And I apologize, I don't have that page number. Ms. Malinowski,
It's
227?
227.
Mr. Chair, it reads, the committee, A&F committee recommended staff create a list of surplus property in conjunction with the council members whose district the property lies in. So that's what we're voting on. We're not selling anything.
Yeah, that's the point we're making.
That's correct, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone's clear on the motion?
Only thing I was saying, I will never vote to sell it for less than, but I will vote on the motion that came out of the committee. Thank you.
That's what's before us. Ms. Owen, can you call the roll for the motion regarding the staff recommendation for F?
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
That brings us to item G. That's sewer availability of letter for bunch at Garnet Fair Road Development.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair. Move to approve.
Mike, you recognize.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Motion for approval by Smythe. Is there a second? Livingston was seconded. Discussion. Item B.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, then you recognize.
Yes, just a quick question on the bottom of page 242. Part of the motion out of the committee was to request that the legal department generate a standardized document for this type of service. I just wanted to understand how that document was going to be brought back to council to make sure that it doesn't get lost.
And someone for legal answer how that's going to get back to council.
Mr. Chair, this is Director Davis, if I could be recognized.
Mr. Davis.
Yeah, please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but the council person did request legal, so I'm going to have to ask Mr. Davis to pause for a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brown, I just want to know however it's going to come back to us, so
Okay.
whoever is the appropriate person to answer.
Understood. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Davis, you may continue.
I was just going to say, this is just merely a letter that lets the developer move forward with the purchase of the property and the planning, and then it will come back to us for the delegated review process. And at that time is when they submit plans and we approve it, And we have a contract that does have an internal hold harmless clause in it. And I believe that has been something that we've used for many years now. So that I noticed it, I read it the other day. It does have the hold harmless clause in the contract.
So this isn't a process, this is just a letter.
Yeah, the
Thank
letter allows them to move forward with the purchase of land, the hiring of a consultant, and the development of design plans and permitting, which comes through our house in the sense of for water and sewer permitting. And that permitting will be part of the delegated review process, which will come back to A&F committee at that time when it's about to be built, so, or about to be permitted, so.
You through, Ms. Duggan?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Reference item 13.
Yes,
G.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Teresa, you recognize.
Thank you. Yes, I am grateful for those people who are sewer experts, and I am not one of those. I was just wondering if there's any risk associated with the disconnection and reconnection of these, I guess, systems. Is this something that is, kind of regularly done and no big deal, or is this process is there any risk associated with the disconnection, reconnection?
Mr. Chair, if I could be recognized.
Yes, you're recognized.
This is a standard procedure, so it's much like connecting another sewer connection from a house or a building to a different pipe. So what we would be doing is disconnecting it where it connects now and then reconnecting it to a new pipe. So that process is pretty simple and pretty straightforward for a contractor. It does involve some excavation at the site of the manhole on Garners Ferry Road and Trotter Road. And that's where everything goes now on the Garners Ferry corridor from the transfer area. And we will be connecting that to the new backbone of the Southeast system. And so it'll be redirected with a simple pipe connection at that manhole.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm assuming that's going to be like tearing up the road there. And then, yeah.
There'll be a little pothole right there at that spot, probably 5 to 10 feet in a rectangle. And that spot will be plated over and worked on, and those pipes will be disconnected. But again, it's a standard procedure that's done on a regular basis for a contractor, a utility contractor.
Okay, great. So thank you. That makes me feel a little bit better.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions about the motion regarding 13G? If not, I'll ask Ms. Only to call the roll for 13G.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning, Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. That brings us to 13H, annual leave rollover. Chair, entertain a motion regarding the item regarding annual leave rollover, page 249 to 261 in your packet.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve H and I together unless my colleagues don't want to do
I
that.
second that, Mr. Malinowski. I was gonna make the
It's
motion.
moving properly second to approval of items H and I. H is sick leave and I is first annual leave.
Mr. Chair, I just have a couple. Yes, I just have a question about H. So if we can deal with that and still combine them, I'm okay with that.
That's fine. We can do that.
Okay.
Go ahead. Ask your question.
Okay, thank you. So just looking at the date, the accrued annual leave to expire on June 30th, 2021, looking at vaccination estimations of vaccinations for folks, a lot of folks probably will not be fully, maybe they'll be half vaccinated, but maybe not fully vaccinated by that date. And I just don't know if this is long enough to extend this annual leave. I would make a substitute motion to take that out another 3 or 6 months.
Councilmember,
Just to give people a chance to, get vaccinated and then, actually take a vacation.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, I have Ms. Dixon, Mr. Baranowski, and Mr. Brown. You need a clarification on something?
Yes, sir. I was going to
Go
say.
ahead, please, and then
I was going to.
Dixon
Yeah.
Baranowski. Go ahead.
I was going to simply say the idea behind that timeline, Ms. Teresa, was that we want to encourage employees to actually take the leave. So I follow what you're saying. I support that, but we just want to encourage people to go ahead and use the leave. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I apologize. I said Dixon Mountain. I don't remember which one I said first.
Mr. Ratio, that was a part, Mr. Brown clarified that as far as I'm concerned, was to encourage them to go ahead. And I believe that if it's necessary in the future to extend it, then I'm sure you all can come up with some kind of a plan to extend it. But right now, this is what came out. The ANF committee was to let it go through June. So thank you.
I'm fine, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brown answered it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? And the motion is for approval of H and I.
Yes, sir.
Further
Thank you.
discussion?
Just one more, Mr. Chair.
You recognize it.
Thank you. So this item could be brought back before us if it was determined that perhaps another extension might be needed just because of COVID circumstances. Okay.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. There being no further discussion, Ms. Owen, can you call the roll for the motion for items H and I?
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning, Myers,
Yes, ma'am.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 13K. Move to remit the $300,000 private donation negotiated by Councilman Dave Myers and Chip Jackson, earmarked for the Taylor's community for Richland County Parks and Recreation other and IGA to be designed as funding for the Taylor Community Park. The chair will entertain a motion regarding item 13K.
Mr.
Ms.
Chair,
Myers, recognized.
I move to approve for discussion.
Motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
For discussion.
It's moving properly second. Discussion for item 13K.
Mr. Chair, may I be recognized?
Myers, you recognize.
Thank you. So a couple of people have called me and asked about this item and have said that they have some concerns because it's not yet been agreed for Parks and Rec that they have money for ongoing upkeep, or that they could complete the park, or that the third installment has not yet been paid. I'd like to speak to those issues in sequence. The agreement between Rain Living and Richland County, taking the third one first, was that Rain would repay Richland County for building the park before the 2,000-bed student dormitory or student living complex was completed, and they would repay Richland County in installments. Mr. Chair, I believe you were in those negotiations and in those meetings. And Rain Living has, in fact, kept up its bargain. It has given us $100,000 each year around this time, and I called to check on when the third check would be received, and that one will be received before the end of this year. The problem has been that Richland County hasn't made any movement on its part to get the parks done. And I've had meetings with the staff and with Parks and Rec, and at that last meeting, we were supposed to tender an IGA to Parks and Rec, which hasn't gotten to them yet. My concern is that the dormitory, the student housing is up. And the reason, as you will remember, Mr. Livingston, the reason that we were doing this was because this park was going to provide a buffer between the folks in the Taylor's community and 2,000 additional students. Now, COVID has, of course, given us all a respite, but it does, at some point, this community does need to have the benefit of what it was promised. My reason for this motion is to allow the people who build parks to go ahead and build a park and to put it into the system as they said they could, so long as we would, recognize that it would require upkeep money on an annual basis. And they promised to build something that wouldn't be the Taj Mahal of parks, that would require millions of dollars in upkeep annually. But given that, this money was donated for the park, and at that time, Tracy Hagler said that $300,000 was a gracious plenty for any kind of park we wanted to build in that small space. So I'd like us to at least move forward so the community has some sense that when the students come back, they won't be overrun with, students doing all kinds of interesting things, literally in their homes, with no barrier between them and the students. Thank you. So I'd ask my colleagues to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Chair.
Mr. I'm not recognized.
Thank you. I'm looking at what's in front of us, and it was supposed to go to legal to have them advise the council what steps need to be taken to deliver the park. And I'm wondering if maybe legal can give us a time frame, because it seems in the A&F committee and the notes that were provided that there is some legal discussion or questions that needed to be answered, and that's why it got sent to legal.
Do anybody recall what the legal questions that were to be answered?
Mr. Livingston?
Yes.
Yeah, I am not personally familiar with that, Mr. Malinowski, but I will certainly check into that and get you an answer.
Okay, well, that was done November 19th, so I don't know why something hasn't been provided to your office by somebody that was at that meeting. Can anybody answer? Have they sent something to legal and it's been lost in the sending, or why legal doesn't have this yet to give us something back? I mean, that's 2.5 weeks ago.
Mr. Chair, may I be recognized?
I'll have Ms. Newton next, and then you, Ms. Dixon.
Mr. Chair, can we get an answer from somebody?
I said next. Go ahead, Ms.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to know why legal has not been advised of what the committee recommended back on November 19th. We're now hearing from Mr. Smith that he's unaware of this.
Mr. Malinowski, if I'm not mistaken, and so we have to go back and look at the record, but I believe Brad attended that meeting. So in terms of getting information to legal, I believe legal, at least a member of the legal team, was in attendance at the meeting.
Yeah. So let me be clear, Mr. Malinowski.
That's not right.
I was not at the meeting, so I can't address it. If Mr. Brown indicates that Brad was there, that's why I said that I will have to look into it and get back to you. But I didn't mean to suggest that no one from legal knew anything about it. It's just that I'm not familiar with it.
I understand that, Mr. Smith, but here we are, and things that have been spoken about year after year after year, that this council passes something, asks for something, and it doesn't get passed along. Does that mean if Mr. Farah was to drop dead the next day or yesterday, that we get no answers, that there's no input to the rest of the legal department from these meetings? That's my question. Somebody should know about it. It was brought up here on the agenda, and it says right there on page 267 that the committee instructed legal to advise us what we could do. So
Yeah.
somebody from legal should have at least said, we're working on it. But instead we get, I wasn't there, so I don't know about it. Thank you.
So
That's all right. That's all right.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I follow up on
I have Ms.
Mr.
Newton and then Ms. Dickerson.
Oh, that's-
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to defer to Ms. Dickerson, who I think wants to give clarification from the committee process.
Ms. Dickerson, you recognize.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Newton. And the other thing was that this item, we were supposed to like put this in the overall Renaissance plans. Once it was, once we renegotiated, we were supposed to transfer it over to the Renaissance plan. Once that plan is perhaps being renamed to include this item. So the notes to send to legal for them to give us further advice. And I'm with you, Mr. Manager. Sometimes these things get put back onto the agenda. They're really kind of confusing because the notes are very vague, but the notes on page 67 explain what happened in that meeting. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Ms. Myers, I think what's on the floor is it?
Mr. Livingston, just one more thing. I kind of am reluctant to have this one thrown into Renaissance because literally we sat down 3 years while a 2,200 bed facility campus has been built for those students, and we have not even come up with the first stages of a plan for something that's not to be built with county money. It's going to be reimbursed by a private source. And if we put it into Renaissance, that means that these folks are going to wait 3 to 5 more years while literally that whole campus has been built out on top of their houses. And that's my only objection with putting this one into Renaissance, because it's not a part of Renaissance. It was separately negotiated to benefit a small community that was being overrun by students when we approved additional student housing in their neighborhood.
Mr. Mann and Ms. Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm thinking that we may have the whole notion of Renaissance go away, but more importantly, I totally agree with Ms. Myers that this has no connection with what we used to call Renaissance or what I understand the motion that we're going to go back and find and clean up and be ready in terms of looking at services and facilities being provided by the county. This to me is a total standalone, just as she's described it.
Thank you. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given, and I agree that this is a standalone matter, and given that these promises were made to the community, and also that we have a third party who's paying for it, I would like to offer a substitute motion. The current motion, as I understand it, is that we create an IGA with RCRC. My understanding is that RCRC does have some questions and concerns about how they would like to move forward with this, but my substitute motion would be that we move forward to draft an MOU or IGA with RCRC with the understanding that we don't move forward to build anything until we have received that final payment for the park. But I guess I would just ask, in the event, Ms. Myers, that we don't come to an agreement with Richland County Recreation Commission, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. Is there some alternative that you want to be, part of this motion so that this doesn't then get lost or start over? So I guess I started to make a motion and I ended with a question.
Well, having had now, thank you, sir. Having now had 3 meetings with Richland County Recreation Commission, it doesn't surprise me that they have questions about what would be in an IGA, because you negotiate IGAs. So I don't think that that's an impediment to the motion going forward as written. nor do I think we ought to add a new condition, which is, and if we don't receive the third payment, nothing can happen. Because, in fact, when we negotiated this from the beginning, we gave the developer 3 years to make the payments, and they kept their word. They haven't welched on paying. So I don't know what the concern is with regard to the third payment, because we agreed to start construction before all the payments were made. And Mr. Livingston, you can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think you were there as well when we said that, you know, the issue was not would we receive all the money before we turned a blade of soil or blade of grass. We were going to build it, and they were going to reimburse, and we were going to build it then with CDBG funds and replace, you know, or with direct county funds. I can't even remember, but we agreed to build it out so that it would be done before the students came and took occupancy of that area. And I understand what you're trying to do, Ms. Newton, but I do not agree that we should now say that we're adding new conditions to this community getting what we negotiated on their behalf in exchange for Rain building 2,200 new student beds. I think that would be really rich to go back and say to that community, because that was the condition on which we voted to allow the student housing to be built in that area.
Mr. Chair?
Let me, just for clarification, and I have Ms. Malinowski hand up for a while, Ms. Dixon, you'll follow him, but I'll just hold mine and go to Ms. Malinowski and Ms. Dickinson.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say that the only reason I wouldn't support this motion right now, I mean, I'm in favor of getting the money, building the park, or, you know, spending the money to build the park. But as Mr. Manning says, this is something that is out of the council's purview, really, when it comes to this. If it's a private developer giving money for a community to have a park built, we may be the go-between of those individuals. But when the committee instructed legal to come back with more information, I did not then ask the many questions I had in that committee. So I still have questions to ask. Of course, I don't have that committee agenda in front of me now to be able to ask them. So until I get some answers, I'll have to not support that this time. Thank you.
Ms. Dickerson?
Yeah, and I really want to say again, based on the notes, and if I recall correctly, I know this is a standalone item, but according to the notes that's in the minutes that's in our agenda, on November 19th, the A&F committee recommended including this item in the overall Renaissance plan discussion. It's not saying that it's going to be the Renaissance, it said the Renaissance plan discussion. Now that name may change or whatever, but this item was supposed to be inclusive in that discussion, and along with the information that is on page 267. And right now, until I get something different, I cannot support this at this point in time.
Any further discussion? And
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Myers, you recognize.
May I offer a substitute motion to defer this for 1 week to allow the legal department to bring back a suggested way forward to ride along with what is before us on the consent agenda?
I can support the
Is there a second to that? That's a motion. That's something motion?
Yes, sir.
That'll be a second something motion. It's moved in. Is there a second to it?
I second it, Mr. Chair.
That second something motion moved in properly second. Any discussion? If not, we'll carry that second substitute motion by Ms. Myers regarding to refer this matter to legal as described. If there's no discussion on that one, I'll ask.
It's a deferral, Mr. Chair, no discussion.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
That was referral. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just to make sure that I understand what the council's motion is regarding this item, the item itself actually talks about there being an IGA developed between the county and Parks and Recreation. And I'm assuming that there's been discussions by staff or council or someone on the county's behalf as it relates to some preliminary terms and conditions related to this IGA. And so does anybody have any notes or any information that they can share with us related to what discussions have already taken place that could be used as a basis to start to at least develop a draft of an idea?
Mr. Chair, may I respond to that?
Yes, it's nice recognized.
So, Mr. Smith, more than a year ago, with all of these concerns that I've just raised tonight, I was in a meeting with Mr. Voyner, Ms. Powell, Ms. Lakita Watkins, and her deputy, I don't remember her name, from Parks and Rec. And our staff took an action that they would follow up with Parks and Rec and begin working towards an IGA. So I would direct you to those folks who might, in fact, have notes from that meeting and hopefully followed up, as they said they would, with the Parks and Rec staff who were eager at that point to begin discussions on things that they could take before their board. Thank you.
Okay. So in addition to developing
You need to carry the vote and have the discussion afterwards. And give I think you need to carry the vote and have the discussion on this item afterwards.
Was that motion was for deferral? No, that motion was for discussion.
Yes, sir, it was.
No, sir, it was to defer 1 week.
But we're getting clarification on you know.
Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to make sure that if there's an expectation of council that we bring something back, that I know exactly what it is that's being asked that be brought back to the council. And right now, I'm trying to figure out where to get the information from because currently we don't have anything. So Ms. Myers has answered that question, and I just want to ask one other clarifying question, other than perhaps bringing back a draft IGA along the lines that apparently have been discussed with community development and maybe planning. Is there anything else that the council is asking us to bring back in a week with this item?
May I speak to that, Mr.
Just for clarification, go ahead.
So for clarification, if in fact nothing happened after that meeting, Mr. Smith, that it would be helpful for you to give us some guidance as to what alternatives we have to move this along so that before the students come back, there is a buffer in this community for that group. So if there's nothing that's been done, that's information too. So thank you.
Thank y'all. And again, thanks, Mr. Smith, for asking for clarification so you can move on. I'm going to ask Mrs. Owens to call the roll for this item.
Malinowski. Dickerson.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Manning.
No.
Myers.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 14 on your agenda, third reading items.
Mr. Chair, I apologize for interrupting, sir.
Mr.
Could we have item 13N reconsidered so that the base could begin with that project? That was the sewer project for McIntyre.
So moved.
It's been moved.
Second.
Second.
Properly second for which item was that again for sure?
McIntyre Joint National Guard.
No, I just want the number. I mean,
Yes, sir. 13.
National Guard. Thank you. Any that's for reconsideration. Chair would ask Ms. Owens to call the roll for consideration for that item.
Malinowski.
No.
Dickerson.
No.
McBride.
No.
Livingston.
No.
Teratio.
No.
Walker,
No.
Manning,
No.
Myers,
No, ma'am.
Newton. Motion fails.
That brings item 14 on your agenda, third reading items. First one is item 14A, authorize execution and delivery of fee in lieu of ad valorem taxes agreement by between Richland County, South Carolina, and Project Offer to provide for payment of fee in lieu of taxes and other related matters.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Lee, recognize.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve items 14A through C.
Again,
Motion for approval for item 14A through C. It's properly second. Discussion. There'll be none. I ask Ms. Only to call the roll.
Malinowski,
yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
That brings to item 15.
Mr. Livingston, is,
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
Chair, I move to
Mr.
reconsider item 14C.
But was that a motion for reconsideration, you said?
Correct. I move to reconsider item 14C.
The motion reconsider item 14C.
Second.
Mr. Chair,
Second.
is it possible to reconsider all three items?
Yes.
So move.
Second.
It's moving proper second to reconsider items A, B, and C. Proper second. Ms. Only can call the roll for the reconsideration items 14A, B, and C.
Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson,
No.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
No.
Horatio,
No.
Walker,
No.
Manning, Myers, Newton.
Yes. I mean, sorry, no. I meant no.
Motion failed.
Thank you. That brings us to item 15, second reading items. 15A, authorize execution and delivery of fee in lieu of ad valorem taxes and incentive agreement by between Richland County, South Carolina, and Project Cross to provide for payment of fee in lieu of taxes, authorizing certain infrastructure credits and other matters related. Entertain a motion for item 15A.
So move.
Move for approval.
Second.
Properly second.
Second.
Any discussion? Item 14A. There being no discussion, I'll ask Ms. On the call roll for item 15A.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning, Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to the report of the Economic Development Committee. And that's item 16A, authorize expansion of and ratification of boundaries of the I-77 Corridor Regional Industrial Park jointly developed with Fairfield County to include certain real properties in Richland County and other related matters. Chair recommend the committee's recommendation was for approval. And that is related, Mr. Rubel.
Yes, sir.
Which item is that specifically related to?
It's related to Project Sunshine or
Yeah, just want to make sure that was clear. Yes.
Yes, sir. And it's just a ratification of something already agreed to.
It's what wasn't stated. That's why I want to make sure. The committee's recommendation was for approval for that ratification of that item. Any discussion? There being none, the chair would ask its owner to call the roll for the motion for approval of committee's recommendation for item 16A.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes, ma'am.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Miss, someone we recognize?
Mr. Chair, it's Walker. I was simply
Mr.
going
Walker,
to ask
recognize.
if that item needs reconsideration as well.
There's a motion reconsideration for item 16A. Is there a second? If not, I'll second that item for reconsideration. So it's moving properly second. Discussion. Well, that's reconsideration. Ms. Online, call the roll for reconsideration for item 16A.
Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson,
No.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
No.
Horatio,
No.
Walker,
No.
Manning,
No.
Myers,
No, ma'am.
Newton.
No.
Motion fails.
That makes item 17, report of the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee. Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 17A, Decker Woodfield Neighborhood Improvement, the Faraway Drive Sidewalk Contract Award. The committee unanimously recommends to award the Fairway Drive Sidewalk Project to AOS Specialty Contractors for $288,933, a 10% construction contingency and a 10% utility contingency for $28,893.33 each, for a total budget of $346,719.60. There is $17,631+ available in the neighborhood improvement budget.
You've heard the committee's recommendation. Discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Malinowski, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since that committee meeting, I was reviewing this, the cost brackets that were given to us. And I'm just wondering on some of the items in there, for example, bonds and insurance. Aren't the companies that we hire to work for us required to provide their own insurance?
So we have someone from staff respond to that.
Why would we pay for it?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do have the Director of Transportation on the line as well. So Mr. Nehemiah, if you could speak to the council, please.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Chairman. From my understanding, those are normal inclusions in any contract we award. Yes, they are required to have insurance for a variety of reasons as required by the county procurement. I don't have an answer whether that's what you're reading is something unique or not, but those are typical line items within any contract.
How about further down where it says unclassified excavation? Wouldn't we like to know exactly what excavation we're paying for?
Yes, sir. That's a very typical line item in just about every contract, because at times during construction, you'll have unknowns that'll pop up and will require something that's really not a specific classification. Therefore, that would fall into that category, but that would be defined from the contractor to the project manager to verify and validate said charge. And it'd also be reviewed by the inspector on site.
Okay, I've got the feeling I'm gonna get the same answer for my next and will more than likely be my last question, because it sounds like a typical line item is the pat answer to give. What about these construction signs? If I'm in the construction business, wouldn't I have permanent signs that I'm using out of my own portfolio?
A lot of those construction signs you'll find will get damaged from project to project just because of the nature. So the contractors will include those, the newer signs in each new project. I would imagine if they did have some lying around that were usable, they would use them. But again, that is something that we normally see.
So that's a typical line item, correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you.
And there's requirements to have certain signs depending on where the project is and who owns the right of way.
Any further questions on item 17A? Ms. Owen, can you call the roll for the committee's recommendation for item 17A?
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson, McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
No.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings to item.
Thank you,
Somebody,
Mr. Chairman. Item 17B, mitigation credit sales, Hauser NR Company for the I-26 interchange widening 2. The committee unanimously recommends the sale of these credit sales to Weyerhaeuser NR Company in the amount of $189,520.94.
committee's recommendation, discussion. There's no discussion. Mrs. Owen, can you call the roll for committee's recommendation for item 17B?
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson, McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
No.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
I vote no. I just want the record to reflect that I wasn't at the committee meeting, although I'm a member. I would have voted no. Thank you.
Newton.
No.
Motion passes.
Mr. Chair,
Manning?
before moving to item 17C, I would like to move for reconsideration for 17A and 17B.
You heard the motion reconsideration 17A and B. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moving properly second. Ms. Owen, can you call the roll for reconsideration for A and B, 17A and B?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
No.
Horatio,
No.
Walker,
Yes.
No.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion fails.
That brings us to item 17C, Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 17C is for the fiscal year 21 transportation ban bond. That information's on pages 502 to 566 in your packet. The motion is the committee recommended on a vote 3-1 for approval of the resolution on pages 568, 569, and 570 to bond for 100 million, pay down 25 million of outstanding debt from the last transportation ban due in February of 2021.
You heard committee's recommendation. Is a motion? I'm sorry, is the move properly in discussion? Ms. Malinowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 502 of our agenda, we've got a staff recommended action. It actually gives us two choices and then there's no real recommendation. So I'd like to know now, what is the staff recommendation? It says they request approval of the resolution to 1, ban for this amount, or 2, bonding for this amount. So what is the actual recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, if I may address that, please. So
Yes, now I need staff too. Go ahead.
Well, that was what was the staff's recommendation, but when it went to committee, we asked for clarification on that. The clarification that they gave us is what is in the motion that I just gave you from the committee, which was approval of the resolution for bond for 100 million and pay down 25 million of outstanding debt from the last transportation ban due in February 2021. Staff, did I get that correct in terms of how we dealt with that in the process?
You are correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then if
So again, Mr. Malinowski, I think it's like earlier in the agenda, somehow we need to figure out who's preparing the agenda and why the agendas seem to not be in sync of a lot of hard work and time put in by staff and council that don't seem to be before us when we get to the full council meeting. Thank you for letting me give that commentary.
Yeah, and a minute agenda was sent out with that change.
Mr. Chair, also, in page 504, the second paragraph, it says the original ordinance does not require a resolution, but staff's proposing that we draft a resolution. What's the reason for that, please?
Mr. Chair, I have legal on the line. If you may allow him to answer that question, sir.
Sure, Mr. Jones.
Yes, sir. Mr. Malinowski and other members of council, in discussing the requirement of a resolution, the conclusion of administration and the chair was that it would be best for council to see all this again and go ahead and give a vote, even if it was for the bonds. The authorization to issue bonds is clear in the ordinance, but given all the discussion that's happened over these many years regarding bonds and bans, it seemed best to give the council an opportunity to discuss it, which is the purpose of the resolution.
Okay, also, the paragraph below that, it says paying this off is not operationally feasible. Why not?
So I'll have Mr. Nehemiah speak directly to that. But if you were to pay all of the funds back at one time, you would only have funds to use that are in your possession, and we would not have funds on hand to continue projects that are currently ongoing. Thus, it would put a immediate halt to the furtherance of these services. But I'll have the director clarify if I misspoke on that response. Mr. Nehemiah?
Well, if you have not misspoke, that's all he needs to say, please.
That's correct, Mr. Brown.
Thank you. And also, on the top of page 505, it says, because the department paid down 50 million in debt last year, plans on paying 25 million this year, there are no further options for debt financing. But is that actually true?
That is true. And to the extent that Mr. Jones, if you could come back and just explain just briefly to the council what this does, I would appreciate that.
Yes, sir. So effectively, the authorization for issuance of the bonds would be exhausted with $100 million worth of debt, and the ability to repay those bonds and do projects, which is something I'm certain will come up in this discussion, would work with $100 million in debt, but would be problematic, likely problematic, if there was more debt involved. Which is why the pay down has been suggested here.
Okay, and I'd also like to know then, for the record, Mr. Niermeyer, I believe you have these figures there, and that is, since the county has begun the ban/bond debt incurrence, how much has Richland County spent to date for issuing that debt? In other words, what is the interest and any other fees, legal or otherwise?
Yes, Mr. Malinowski, I have those figures in front of me. For the history of the transportation bans that have been issued, we have accrued or paid $4.385502 million in cost.
That's what we've paid in cost. That's excluding the principal payment back, right?
No, sir, that is actually the balance between the premiums we receive for issuance, the interest, and then the actual arbitrage or interest paid for those bond anticipation notes.
Okay, so what we've paid is that 4.385 million is what it's cost us to have these things issued, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, do you have any idea, and I didn't ask you this before, I'm sorry if you don't have it, that's fine, we can get it later, on moving forward, what type of additional costs we're going to incur on that before it's all paid off?
I might have to defer to First Trying on this one. I think they have the figures in front of them and might be able to answer that more clearly.
That's fine.
Mr. Cheatwood, are you on?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. This is David Cheatwood. Mr. Malinowski, you would, based on estimated interest rates, if you bonded for this $100 million and repaid it over a 7-year term, your net interest and cost would be approximately $2,837,000.
Thank you, sir. I'm through, Mr. Chair, for now.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, what's the first is, again, the staff recommendation authorized the issuance of the sale of not to exceed $100 million for general obligation bonds for the county for refinancing. Ms. Owen, can you call the roll for the county's?
Mr. Chair, before she calls the roll, can I just put something on the record?
Yes, you can recognize.
Yeah, I remain in favor of a pay-as-you-go formula, and I would pay off and extinguish the ban and not bond further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And I concur.
Let me ask a quick question to staff. What can you tell me the consequences of or the advantages of the bond versus not doing a bond as relates to projects getting done or anything happening with the program? Does this mean if you don't do anything, we just shut the program down? It seems to be the direction some want to go. Can staff kind of explain that to me in terms of the consequences? Why you're recommending this over a ban or doing nothing?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I'm going to have Mr. Niermeyer address it in detail, but I would say that this is moving us towards the pay-go process. So I'll just stop there. And Mr. Niermeyer, you could provide more detail as to what that looks like from an operational standpoint, please, sir.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Brown. So there's two pieces to this, and I've discussed this with Mr. Jones and Mr. Cheatwood. First, we have an obligation that's due in February. Bonding will address that obligation. If we decided to ban, it'd be a similar process as last year. We would roll it over Of the 125 we banned for, we've spent 100 with about 25 remaining on it. So basically that bonding would then address that obligation. Secondly, it locks us into more sound planning moving forward. We would know when these debt payments are due annually or semi-annually, and those can be planned for accordingly within the budget. So as we alluded to, or we mentioned earlier, there's no more debt financing available once this occurs, and this does move us to a revenue in, revenue out, or pay-as-you-go model. So we're completely relying on revenue, the remaining money within our account, as well as any kind of outside funding that we could secure through grants. So the discussion was, this is the most responsible way moving forward, considering the past year and the concerns of council, and we believe this is the best way to address that. If we paid off all at once, I believe is with interest about $128 million, even with the $440 million or so anticipated revenue this year. We are talking about having $60 million in the account, of which more than half is obligated. Another half of that is probably going to be encumbered on contracts this year, and we would essentially shut down the program as it is today.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, Ms. Owen, I'll ask you to call the roll for the county's recommendation for item 17C.
Malinowski.
No.
Dickerson. McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Horatio.
Sorry, I didn't get off mute fast enough. No.
Walker.
Yes.
Manning.
Yes.
Myers.
No.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move for reconsideration, please.
Motion for reconsideration, item C, is a second.
Second.
Moving properly second, reconsideration. Ms. Owen, can you call the roll for the motion for reconsideration for item 17C?
Malinowski.
Yes.
Dickerson. McBride.
No.
Livingston.
No.
Horatio.
No.
Walker.
No.
Manning.
No.
Myers.
Yes.
Newton.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In conclusion, for anybody that was following, we did have an item before us in the committee today that we deferred, and the committee scheduled an ad hoc committee meeting for next Tuesday afternoon. So it had looked on your calendar like this would have been your last transportation ad hoc committee meeting of this calendar year. However, the one item that got deferred will be taken up next week and brought to you on next Tuesday night. That said, I want to thank Mr. Niemeyer, all the members of the committee, all the staff, Mr. Jones, Mr. Cheatwood being with us tonight. And that concludes the report of the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item is item 18, the report of the Sewer Ad Hoc Committee.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there was one item on the scheduled agenda, and that has been held in committee to obtain more information from staff. And that concludes my report. And I want to thank all those other people too that Mr. Manning did.
Thank you. And we added an item to the agenda, you may recall. I think that was from the Rules Committee, Mr. Malinowski.
Yes, sir, it was. We have one item and there was a,
Point of order.
Yes.
So Mr. Malinowski said that there was one item from the sewer ad hoc committee that was held in committee, but my revised agenda has a second item. And item
Yes, the sewer
18B,
service,
was that held in committee also?
yes, there was no time to get to that.
Okay, thank you.
It will be on the next agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Neal, for bringing that up.
Okay,
You may go ahead, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, sir. For the
Ms. Newton, making sure since that item was listed there.
For the Rules Committee, we were just advised that an unexpected vacancy came about on the Richland Memorial Hospital Board. And based on that unexpected vacancy, we would like to advertise the vacancy at the next time that the clerk advertises vacancies, and that's the committee's recommendation.
You heard the committee's recommendation reference advertising vacancy. Any discussion? If not, I'll ask Ms. Arnold to call the roll for the committee's recommendation to advertise the vacancy for the prison health.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes, ma'am.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion passes.
Concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That brings us to item 19 on your agenda, which is other items. 19A, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020 general fund annual budget by $2,829,714 to amend the economic development budget for property acquisition, first reading. It's entertain a motion reference. Well, I'm sorry, that's the committee's recommendation, excuse me. So the committee recommendation was for approval, discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
these pages 571 to 573.
I think they were like one page off. You remember you got an amended agenda with page numbers changed slightly?
Okay, so we don't have any information, just this one liner, right? Just the one line to amend the general fund budget.
Should be 61 through 50 on the amended agenda, 61 through 50, 51 through 651 through 653.
Okay, well, I don't have that, so I'll vote no for now till I get to review it. Thank you.
And this is the first reading line.
Mr. Chair,
Who was that?
Mr. Walker.
Mr. Walker, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think it'd be prudent, because these two items were explained pretty well to us in the Economic Development Committee earlier. I would suggest that if Mr. Rubel is still on the line, he present that same explanation of
Yeah,
the
Ms. Rubel, you mentioned that earlier.
the mechanics of what this is. It's actually just a mechanics process in sequence with the Project Sunshine overall project. So if we could hear from Mr. Rubel for a better explanation, that may help appease some of our colleagues.
Yeah, I was going to get to that clarification. Mr. Rubel, why don't you go ahead, and this will be a good time for you to go ahead and just explain, as you did earlier, about this matter.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair and members of council. There is a piece of funds that was a clawback from Siemens Diesel that was originally allocated to economic development. A portion of that funds remained in the general fund, and a portion went to the operating fund for economic development. For several years, economic development operated out of that fund. This is the remaining monies in the general fund, and it's being redistributed or reallocated back over for the purchase of the property for Mark Anthony Brewing.
Any questions, Mr. Rubin? Any more clarification on this matter?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So we didn't have enough money to buy the property. We have to have this money, is that it?
This money was part of the economic development funds. It was just situated in the general fund.
I won't delay the meeting. I'll just wait until I can see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask Ms. Owens to carry the motion for item 19A.
Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson,
No.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
That brings us to item 19B. Mr. Rubin, if you have an agenda with you, can you tell me the difference between 19A and B? I mean, they seem to be the same items.
Mr. Chair, may I address that, sir? And I have
Yes.
it on the line. So it's a companion piece because one, the money has to move between funds. And so you have to account for both of those funds. That's why they look similar, because it's both of those funds are involved.
So we need to take them up both? But in other words, what we passed, that satisfy that?
The budget director's on the call. He prepared that, I believe is correct.
Yeah. Chair Livingston, may I be recognized?
Yes, please.
Director Rubo mentioned, those funds were situated in the general fund. So there are two associated transactions that need to take place. You're amending the general fund to have access to those funds because they're in the fund balance. And then there's going to be an operational transfer from the general fund to the economic development fund where those funds were actually expended. So yes, those are exactly the same amounts. They incorporated in two different funds. So there's the general fund, the budget amendment, then there's the economic development fund budget amendment, sir.
Thank you. Just want to make sure those clarifications. Chair, entertain a motion. The committee's recommendation for item 19B is for approval discussion. If not, Ms. Only can you call the roll for item 19B, which is companion with 19A?
Malinowski, Dickerson, McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio, Walker,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 19C, fiscal year 20, District 7 hospitality tax allocations, pages 57 through 50 and 58. Entertain a motion. Item 19C.
I move to approve, Mr. Chair.
There's a motion for approval.
Second.
It's properly
I'll second it. Second.
Moving properly second. Any discussion? If not, business only call the roll for item 19C.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson, McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
No.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Miss
Okay.
Only,
Yes, ma'am.
Did you get my vote on that last item?
I did not.
Okay, I vote yes on that one. Sorry about that.
That's fine. Thank you.
Move for reconsideration.
Second.
It's moved proper second reconsideration. Ms. Owens can call the roll for the motion for reconsideration.
Malinowski. McBride.
No.
Livingston.
No.
Horatio.
No.
Walker.
Yes.
Manning.
No.
Myers. Newton.
No. Myers votes no. Apologies.
That's fine. Thank you. Motion fails.
Thank you. That brings us to item 20, which is executive session item on our agenda. And we have one executive session item, and that's a personnel matter regarding the county attorney contractual / personnel matter. The chair entertain a motion going to executive session for that matter, for that item.
So move.
It's been moved.
Second.
It's properly second. Mrs. Only, can you call the roll to go into executive session for the county attorney contracts personnel matter?
Yes, sir. Malinowski.
Yes.
Dickerson.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Horatio.
Yes.
Walker. Manning.
No.
Myers.
No, ma'am.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're now going to executive session. Chair, entertain a motion, come out of executive session.
So moved.
It's
So
been moved,
moved. Second.
properly second. Ms. Only, can you call the roll for the motion to come out of executive session?
Yes, sir. Malinowski. Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride. Livingston,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning, Myers,
Yes, ma'am.
Newton.
McBride, yes.
Yes.
Ms.
Motion
Almond,
passes.
Ms.
Yes,
Almond,
sir.
yeah, I think that was a vote for out of executive session. I did that back when you started, and I vote yes.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now out of executive session. Chair, entertain a motion reference executive session.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Newton, you recognize.
I move that we direct the county attorney to move forward as discussed in executive session and bring back the information requested at our next council meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
You heard the motion properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Mrs. Only to call the roll for the motion following executive session.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning, Myers,
Yes, ma'am.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Oops, excuse me. That brings us to our last item on the motion period on the agenda. I have item 21A, request Richland County create some type of property tax relief for property owned that are affected in a negative way by the penny tax. Negative way refers to lack of normal use as intended or previously used. Now, since we're referring to the penny tax, I sent that to the penny ad hoc committee, because with that committee, obviously, if someone's property is rendered as not usable, there are procedures in place with the penny tax fund to deal with that. So I'll send to that particular committee.
Mr. Chair, if I may, please.
Yes.
I tried to discuss this with Mr. Niermeyer. He could not give me any answers as to what could be done. Recommended that I put a motion in and have it dealt with in that way. And that's why I brought it forward. Now, if we're sending it back to the penny committee, we're going to get the same answer from Mr. Niermeyer that he really doesn't know how we can do this, I guess. So I don't know if we need to get legal involved with it instead.
Well, but then I would expect for Mr. Nehemiah and staff to get with legal and figure out something there. Yeah.
All right, thank you. This actually would be a matter, I think, that would be handled by staff directly. I can't see how we as council members, I mean, the staff can bring it back to council for approval. I don't see how council is going to get involved with trying to create change in tax law, not knowing anything about it or the legalities.
No, I wouldn't suggest. I agree with you. That's why I wanted to send it to the staff and legal.
Okay, the staff. Thank you. I thought you said the ad hoc committee.
Well, at first I was saying the ad hoc committee, but once you said what you said, then they could bring. Once they look at it, they can bring it to the committee if they need to. If they can do anything with it.
Very good. Thank you.
That was the last item on my agenda. next one is adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Nobody want to go home.
Second.
It's motion to adjourn. It's a second.
I second it,
It's
Mr.
moving properly second. Someone call the roll for the motion to adjourn?
Malinowski,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning, Myers,
Yes, ma'am.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Meeting adjourned. Thank everyone very much.